Hey everyone, I'm Josh Golding, here with my good friends Tyler Smith and Al Stroh, and today we're going to talk about Star Trek, the original series, science fiction, high watermark that spawned a 50-year franchise.
TOS, the original series. Yeah.
I don't think it needs much further introduction.
No.
We do want to talk a little bit about some of the things that made this such a phenomenon. What went into it.
I wanted to say, because Gene Roddenberry, it took a lot of guts and vision for him to come up with this show. And he sold it to a studio when science fiction was considered one notch above porno. It was considered financial poison, you know. It was
especially in a prime time.
Yeah, prime time slot, you know, and you know, when you make a regular show, it's very difficult, you know, to do all the things that you need to do to make just a regular average show. But when you're doing science fiction, the difficulty level is exponentially 10, 20, 30 times what a normal show is.
That's sort of the genius of Star Trek, is that the hook of it is that you can put all these other types of stories into a Star Trek world and make sense. So you can do a mystery story, you can do a horror story, you can do a period piece, you know, you could do sort of like a Western.
And you can do a controversial piece that you couldn't do on prime time.
You could do allegories.
By disguising it.
You know what I mean? You can do all these different things in a different week. So the show is actually, you know, it's many different types of shows while being the same show. Anyway, Tyler, let's get started by talking about one of your favorite episodes. Right
Balance of Terror.
Balance of Terror. Oh, you know, the other thing I'd like to do is right now, I'd just like to thank you, Tyler, for making this delicious cake. Yeah. Tyler made us this cake, and you can see right there. It's good stuff. Good job, Tyler. Anyway, go ahead. Balance of Terror.
Balance of Terror, hands down, absolutely my all-time favorite Star Trek episode. And one of the reasons I like the episode so much is the simple fact that they make this clear in the episode when they're trying. Let me explain the plot a little bit.
From the first season, right?
First season. Yeah. But basically what happens is the Romulans and the Federation have tested each other in a war many decades ago. And they didn't know really much about each other, but they divided up the galaxy. They had a neutral zone between the two of them. And you stay on your side, we stay on our side. As long as both sides stay where they are, they're in a state of peace. But the Romulans decide to test the Federation, and they decide to sneak across the neutral zone and start blowing up. They got these forts on asteroids, and they start blowing them up to test the Federation's response to this.
Okay.
So what happens is the Kirk has a situation. He's the only ship in the area who can respond to this other enemy ship, and they have a cloaking device, so they're not sure if they can. They know roughly where the ship is, but not exactly. So they can't easily zero in on it to knock it out. Yeah. So basically, they have to lay down a pattern to try and hit the thing, and hope that they can wipe it out before it wipes them out. You know. So
okay. So why this episode, Tyler?
Because I like the idea that they make this clear in the meeting where they're trying to decide what to do, that sometimes when you're in a leadership position, you may have a no-win scenario. There might be no right answer.
And that's been something they bring up in Star Trek up through the movies. That's been one of the themes. So
yeah.
It's an important episode because you can trace it back.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and I think you were talking about this the other day, is, and this sort of goes back to my point earlier, is this is basically a submarine
warfare.
Movie.
Yeah.
Submarine warfare.
It's a tactical war. Yeah.
Little thing. I mean, what they're doing here is you've got 2 or 3 sets for the Enterprise, 1 set for the enemy ship.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it works.
It's very clever because they make it look very claustrophobic, and you get this feeling that these ships are out there flying blind, sort of, in space.
Yeah.
You know?
Is there some reason why the view screen isn't working on that one? Do they give some reason why Spock has to look into his scope to see?
No, they never explain that, but basically what he's doing is it's like a radar screen that he's looking into, and he can see if there's enough debris from the enemy ship, if they wiped it out or not.
Sort of like the sonar guy.
Yeah, and that's another reason I love this episode was because it's another example of art through adversity.
Right.
You know, when they did the last Star Trek film where they start with the Academy with the young Captain Kirk and all that, they had a lot more money to show all the different decks getting hit and the explosions and all the mayhem. But that was not near as exciting as what I saw in this. This is much better.
It's famous for these what they call bottle episodes, which means that you do it with just your basic 3 sets.
Yeah.
It's like they would have their budget for like some of their episodes would be like a few planets a season or whatever, a certain number of planet episodes, but a certain number of episodes had to be completely on the
Enterprise, nothing else.
With no guest stars either, and so it's like you get some great stuff like innovations like Evil Spock, Evil Kirk. You know, every week somebody's freaking out. And if you notice,
Mirror, you know.
Half the time on Star Trek, it's usually one of the main characters is the villain that week.
Yeah.
I mean, that happens a lot. You know?
Yeah.
And it's all just to save,
save money. Except the only thing is they made some of their best episodes doing that.
Yes, absolutely.
Like Mirror in this one.
It forces the writing to be that much tighter.
And directing and acting and editing everything, you know.
Yeah.
But the thing, one of the things I love about this show is that it's like what Spielberg said in Jaws. He said, because I had less time, less money, couldn't get the special effects to work right, I made a much better movie than if I was able to do it the way I originally planned.
Right.
And the same is absolutely true here. The scenes where they're firing at the enemy ship, you see the Enterprise fire, you see the view screen, you see flashes of light off on the distance.
Right.
You don't see the enemy ship, you just see the flashes of light. And then you cut to the cast looking nervously at the results.
Right.
And then you cut to Spock saying, it's not a hit. We're screwed. You know,
Is this the episode?
Yeah, this is the episode. But the other thing I really loved about this episode.
That's the new special effect.
Yeah.
Enhanced.
Yeah. But the thing I loved about the original episode also is the idea that technology separates you from your enemy. In caveman days, when you fought a man to the death, you had a club or a rock
Or
that you
just go strangle him.
yeah, or with your bare hands. You could see his fear. You could see his blood as you hit him. You know, you saw his mangled body as you killed him. You know, but with technology, it separates you from the person you're killing, and it becomes very antiseptic.
It's much less personal.
Yeah. But the thing is that idea is clearly in here, and that's an interesting idea. And the other thing I absolutely loved about this episode was the fact that you had a newlywed couple who's in love, who's getting married. Their wedding gets interrupted by this war.
Yeah.
They have to go, so they don't have time to actually officially tie the knot.
And then the husband gets killed.
Yeah, the husband gets killed. So that brings.
That's kind of low-hanging fruit, if you ask me. That's maybe one of the times where the series is like takes that's pretty cheap. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I liked it. I liked it.
I know you liked it.
Were they in the?
But it's like no, they
Romulan
introduce
ship,
a married couple in the first 5 minutes, just so one of them can die. I mean, it's like. It's not like they were main characters or anything. It's just like, let's celebrate love. I mean, that's really a setup.
Get your heartstrings.
Anyway, let's move on. And Josh, you had a favorite episode that you were going to talk about.
Do you mind? There's a couple cool things about that episode too. Of note, anyway. The actor that played Spock's father, Sarek, was he the Romulan?
Yeah, that was him. Yeah, that was him. Yeah.
He came back and played Spock's dad in the movies and stuff too.
Right.
And also in the TV show as well, when he has to do surgery, McCoy does surgery on him.
I think that was one of the first times we saw that actor, Mark somebody, but then, like you say, he later went on to be this other character and become quite iconic as that character. But going back and watching that episode, seeing him as a Romulan was kind of a shock.
Right.
You know?
He's not that much older.
Remembered that.
So.
But the thing is he has the ears in both episodes, so he looks exactly the same. You know.
And I don't know, just that episode, like all the others, is a great example of like set design and just the colorful nature of the way they portray the ship, and both ships have a different color.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that too, about Star Trek. I absolutely love the art direction in the TOS.
Yeah, it's very.
You know, it's very good. The uniforms are nice. The sets are nice. They have really good lighting, and it has a 1939 World's Fair feel to it, because they're trying to guess what the future is before it's happened. You see what I'm saying? And that's always fun to look back on.
Think too, a lot of people would have been
because tricorders remind me of cell phones. You know, think about it.
A lot of people would have been watching this in black and white on their home sets, I think. Color TV wasn't that. It's barely been around, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So color TV's way past this. You know. I mean, I'm sorry, black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Way past this.
Back into the
Absolutely.
70s. And
Yeah.
So maybe the color was something that was even discovered by home audiences later on. But
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things about the show is their unabashed use of just splashing color all over the place. And
If you often,
Just because
especially when
they
they're on
can.
the Enterprise, you'll see if you just freeze it. You can always pick up the spectrum in a lot of the shots. So, let's, for instance, like if Spock's wearing blue, the wall behind him will be all the colors except for blue.
Yeah. They think that out.
If there's a guy who's wearing a red shirt, and
They might have a yellow
they'll
background.
have yellow and green and all the other colors
Right.
besides red lit up in the background. So there's really nicely done some shots. But speaking of episodes, Josh, one of your
yes,
episodes.
I want to
City
talk
on
a
the
little
Edge
bit
of
about
Forever.
City on the Edge of Forever. I had read that that was their only episode that won a Hugo Award, actually,
Yeah.
in 1968.
Harlan Ellison wrote it.
Written by Harlan Ellison, and then I read there was several revisions, and the plot changed a little bit in each one. But anyway, they ended up going with the one, of course, that we know, and this is some of the footage from it. But that episode is great. It just starts out right in the middle of the Enterprise is already in the middle of an adventure. They are looking for these temporal distortions on this planet,
Yeah.
Nice, yeah.
and they're on the bridge being buffeted by as these temporal waves are going past them. And Sulu ends up. There's an explosion on the bridge
Yeah.
caused by these temporal
Right,
distortions.
right.
Yeah.
Sulu gets burned when one of the consoles
Yeah.
explodes, and McCoy is just about to give him a shot of cortisone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some kind of
Drug.
And of course, one of the time distortions buffets the bridge at just the wrong time, and he ends up injecting himself.
And over-injecting himself, way over, more than he was planning to
Super
inject the guy.
stimulant.
Inject him with,
Oh,
yeah.
that is a good one. Yeah.
He ends up
And he goes going amok.
McCoy freaks out. It's a good episode.
And he
Forrest
really
Gump
gets a
is
chance to
great.
pour on the
Yeah, he's a
overacting.
great actor. Yeah.
So he curses the bridge crew for murderers and
Yeah, right.
runs,
He runs into the transporter room and makes a run for it.
makes a run
Panic.
for it. They chase him down to the planet where they find that
He's still in a paranoid state at that point.
he's down there, and I think they've
And he's
got him
gone
in
through this
custody for a
time
second.
portal back to late 1930s, early 1940s era.
Great Depression
They
era.
meet
Depression era.
the Guardian of Time, which is essentially an ancient device that speaks like a computer, I guess, and it represents some ancient advanced civilization that everyone escaped through these time portals. And just then, McCoy either gets away from them or runs past them, jumps into the portal,
Yeah.
and suddenly the Enterprise disappears from outer space.
Right. Right.
It's a
Because he
classic
changed history.
time paradox,
Yeah.
where history has changed. So that's one reason why it's so great. It sets up. I think it was the first episode to use the time paradoxes, and it really became something that everybody loved about Trek, and it was repeated in all the iterations in the franchise. But
At some point, yeah, they have a time paradox story.
And it's
They have to
also,
go back and change something because it messed something up in the future.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they chase him. Well, the portal informs them that he's changed history. So they, tell the rest of the crew, if we don't come back, go on and live your lives and make your
Jump through the time portal, pick a time.
But, give us a minute, So they go in after.
Well, they tell him wait as long as you think necessary.
Right.
They get back. Where do they go to? Is it New York City and
New York City Depression era,
I think it's
1930s.
San Francisco?
San Francisco, I think it is.
Okay, San Francisco.
And
Okay.
they don't find McCoy right away, but they end up actually getting there a little
Edith
before
Keeler.
him.
Yeah.
But they
So
do
we gotta
meet-
wait for him.
Joan Collins as Edith Keeler is a social worker who's helping homeless itinerant workers, and she thinks that Spock and Kirk are two probably mentally ill guys who are bums in need of her help, and ends up sort of nursing them and getting them apartment. And Spock starts working on an interface with his tricorder to help
With bear knives and stone knives and bear skins. He describes the
in
technology.
far-fetched detail. He
Yeah,
ends up
there's some great scenes where he's cobbling together like a cyberpunk version of whatever huge version. Of
He's trying to build a supercomputer out of vacuum tubes,
It's all back into.
see how time has changed. Long story short, McCoy shows up at the same halfway house, and
Now he's better.
he's better, and he's sort of on the side being nursed by Keeler.
Yeah.
And as the episode progresses, Kirk and Edith are spending more time together, and they end up falling in love.
Right.
And this is supposed to be over the span of a few weeks or months or something like that.
Yeah.
And I guess the end of the episode is when
They figure out that they figure out that what tricked the time loop
Was Edith Keeler.
is that she lived. She had to die.
Yes.
They found out because she goes on to be this political leader and changes history. So.
and then
they
the
figure out
Nazis
this
end up
person
taking over
they
because
end
of
up
her.
This person
Yeah.
that Kirk has fallen in love with, he has to sacrifice her, let her get hit by this truck.
It's her time to die.
It's her time to die, quote unquote. And so Bones comes running out. Kirk stops him. Bones is like, "What are you doing?" You know, and
you could have saved her.
Well, this is the interesting thing, because in the original episode that Harlan Ellison wrote, he wanted to show Shatner as more of a flawed person, where Spock explains to him the time paradox. You got to let her die. He's like, "No, I'm in love with her." I'm gonna let
he doesn't know. He doesn't think he's going to.
No. But what he says is, "I'm going to let history change.
I'm going to let history change.
I'm going to let billions of people die. I'm going to let the Nazis win, just because I'm in love with her and I don't want her to die. I want to hook up with her."
Right.
And he doesn't care. He just doesn't care. And that's what they changed.
It is good science fiction because it starts to raise other questions. So it's like, so okay, well, let's say he did do that, but it's like they do have phasers and like knowledge of the future. So it's like it is possible they could still let her save and still right the ship, so to speak.
Yeah.
Get Chime back on track. If you wanted to write like a series of books about how they changed like the 40s and 50s and 60s, and you could do all that if you wanted to. But
guide the future that they want.
Yeah, it's a fun one. It's a fun one.
But instead, it ends up being
a piece too, and it shows also like a great thing about Star Trek is that. Obviously for budgetary reasons they're having it on Earth, but it's a lot of this stuff where it's like you could go anywhere in the universe, and Star Trek does this a lot, where it's like you could go literally anywhere in the universe at any time now at this point. We're going to like 1930s Earth. There's like a 50s sort of gangster Earth.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Old West.
Very terrestrial. There's Old West.
Yeah.
It's
Roman.
It's very terrestrially centered science fiction, where it's like the action is happening, like I said, in these sort of TV tropes of the time. And still,
and they do this to save money, as we know.
Yeah, but there's like a mobster episode. There's like this one is like there's sort of
and a Nazi episode, and a Roman episode, because they were running out of money.
Yeah. So Nazi Germany. They go to a Nazi Germany planet. They go to but there are all these things that are like right out of Earth's history, slice of life, little sections.
Yeah.
Leonard Nimoy called the episode "Example of Excellent Tragedy" or something like that in the tropes of.
Are you talking about
this is a
Sitting
real
on the Edge of Forever? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but I would like to say this about the episode also. Joan Collins was never better than in this episode. I think this is the best thing she ever did.
Joan Collins is good. Yeah, we were talking about.
And she was hot in this too.
She looks very good. She's just as hot as she looked. Was in this.
It stands out as one of the best episodes, if you will. It did win the Hugo in '68, and then people say that it's the best of the first season.
It's right up there. It's always right up there with Trouble with Tribbles and
Mirror, Mirror, Devil in the Dark, all the good ones.
Time is another one that people always.
Amok Time, yeah.
All the ones that are, of course, referenced in the later series and remade and stuff. So,
speaking of great episodes, though, this is one that I
Devil in the Dark.
This is a start. Devil in the Dark, yeah. And this is one of my favorites, along with Mirror, Mirror. This has always been one of my favorites. For one thing, I can remember this was one of the ones that honestly sort of did creep me out as a kid. It wasn't so much the execution of it; it was the fact that this monster spit out acid.
Yeah, that thing was.
And getting killed by that, just imagining getting melted by that thing.
Very quickly.
Very quickly. Would disintegrate you in a matter of seconds, That freaked me out as a kid, just the notion of that. I mean, they don't really show anything that's gory, of course, or they sort of...
They didn't have the budget special effects.
What's happening, too, is that they just have this charred mess on the floor when it kills somebody, but... Again, it's like they go down the mining planet, there's this monster that's killing people on these mining planets, they have Spock and Kirk have to chase it down, and they end up getting more and more isolated down in these mines, et cetera, but what's really great about it is a couple things. One, it's because of budgetary reasons, Trek, like we said, had to go through a lot of these sort of roundabout episodes where it was really about gangsters or something like that. No. They really just got to do an old-fashioned, purely science fiction episode.
They kind of did here,
And that's an example of one. This is a purely sort of a science fiction type of an episode. It's not something that's been shoehorned in.
Now, Paramount backlot.
Right, you can argue that it's a horror science fiction, so it is a horror story too. Yeah. But the other thing about it is it's just a good old monster movie. You know what I mean? Because it's because they couldn't make the monsters, they didn't have the budget. It's there's only a few treks where you honestly have a monster, and you do have one in this one. And it's the Horta, which is the overgrown sort of shag carpet, but and it rightfully so gets a lot of flack.
It's supposed to be like a mineral creature,
but it's kind of it's supposed to be sort of like a rock blob, sort of like a mineral blob that sort of can eat rock, lives on rock. And then the other thing that I like about the episode is, besides the art direction, all that stuff, them going around in the caves and they find this thing, is that because it is just an unabashed sort of monster movie.
Yeah.
They're on the track of this thing that keeps killing people to raise the stakes,
Yeah.
And then in the end, in true Star Trek form, and this is always the case in Star Trek, it's just misunderstood.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, you know, it's
not the bad guy after. It's not the bad guy they thought it was.
It's actually protecting its
It has
young.
reasons, yeah.
And it has
Good justifiable reasons to
and
do
so
what it's
it's
doing.
like, even though it looks like this,
It's misunderstood, yeah.
alien, and that they bring that up again and again and again in Star Trek. That's one. You know, it's like Kirk's. First of all, Kirk's always wants to make friends to start with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But a lot of times the monsters, it turns out, and they did this ton in Next Generation as well, all the time in Next Generation.
Yeah.
There was never like a complete just bastard
Bad guy,
you
yeah.
know, rarely on Star Trek after
They always
this kind
had
of thing,
some
you know.
motivation. That
They always had some
you
kind
could
of motivation
understand,
that was at least plausible, gave them a plausible reason. You know, and in science fiction, it's not hard because you can just be like, our planet's going to explode if we don't do this. I mean, you can very easily give these guys.
Yep.
I mean, they overuse it, is what I'm trying to say. Eventually, of course, it becomes, you know, sort of boring. But and you just long for just a jerk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's
A
what-
real villain.
That's so
A
refreshing.
real old-fashioned
Nothing
Shakespearean
about
villain.
The guy that when
Yeah.
Yar
Mustache
gets killed,
twirler.
You know what I mean? That guy
Yeah.
that kills Yar, like the tar monster.
Yeah.
That's just a great, you know, you're like, that's so refreshing when that happens because it's just like a jerk, you know, just like a con character that's just always going to be bad, you know what I mean, no matter
Right.
what. But I don't know, what do you guys think about Double in the Dark? Good? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I liked it a lot. If I had to list my 10 favorites, it's one of them, absolutely. And but the thing that I really like about it was, like you said at the end, they realized that they were the bad guys.
They were going in on the...
They were.
This is one of the ones where Spock has to use the mind meld with.
Yeah, they had to communicate with.
He has to communicate with the mind meld.
And I also like the fact that Dr. McCoy made a concrete mix as a Band-Aid for the thing. I thought that was kind of clever, actually. You know.
Yeah.
He had to. They wound the creature, and McCoy like makes sort of like a concrete paste because the thing is made out of
rock.
stone,
Yeah.
and it's putting that over it. The thing likes it, and so
It works.
yeah, it just shows how. I mean, it's one of those rare instances too where you get. They really utilize it to the fullest. The fact that you've got this alien there that's totally alien. You know, Spock mind melds with it. McCoy is forced to use his extraterrestrial knowledge of all, you know what I mean? So it enables you to like bring in all the science fiction of the show when you have a show.
The
like
trinity
this.
of Bones, Kirk, and McCoy, they all get to participate in this one.
They all get to participate doing what they're good at.
Well, one thing that's interesting to me also about this show was it was a very optimistic show. I mean, most science fiction is designed to prevent the future, not to predict it. This was trying. This is trying to predict a positive future and hope it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Josh and I have had this conversation many times. It's like what's beautiful about it, and you just alluded to it a couple seconds ago, Josh, is that there is this trinity in the original Star Trek of Kirk is the action, so he's the body.
Yeah.
Spock is the brain.
And McCoy's the heart.
He's the heart.
Yeah.
He's the soul of the group. So it's always Kirk is ready to move, but he always waits and he checks for Spock what's the smart thing to do. But then he always checks with McCoy too. He's like, what's the caring thing to do?
He's the conscience too.
McCoy is always saying stuff like, what about these people?
The ethics.
What about these villagers? You know, he's always the guy saying, what about the people we're leaving behind?
Damn it, Jim.
You know, and you have to, and so it's like. And McCoy is...
He's kind of a bleeding heart liberal.
But he's great about it, the way he does
but
it.
but it's done well,
saying, like, what happens to McCoy's character, though, as they go through the series and the movies, is that he gets pushed down more and more till, like, the movies... He's on the level with like Chekhov and Scotty. They lost.
They pushed him in the background.
Became Kirk and Spock were pushed forward. McCoy's character gets pushed to the background, and that's why, except for maybe Star Trek 2, you can make that argument. But that's why the movies there isn't that dynamic there, and they feel much different. You know,
Yeah.
He gets to bitch about Genesis in the Star Trek 2 a little bit.
He gets a little bit of that, and a little bit in the beginning of Star Trek 2, when he's just kind of going around, just kind of bitching, and stuff, you know, about him and that. But yeah, McCoy, and you know, what's also funny about the original series is that. As you grow older, it's like when I was like 18, 19, I was a Shatner guy. I loved Kirk, you know what I mean? Then I was maybe like in my late 20s, mid to late 20s. I fancied myself like an intellectual, and it was like
Spock's your man now.
In your 20s, you go to college or whatever, or you start thinking about, thinking about intellectual pursuits and stuff. And Spock becomes the character that I love the most. And then as I move through my 30s, you know, and approaching my 40s rapidly, Bones is the
becomes your man.
Because as I grow older, it's like I try to see that side of life more. And think about the little guy and do those kind of things where you realize that, quote, as cheesy it is, that's kind of where life's at. You know? And so
I'm afraid
Bones becomes
the new movies might keep him marginalized.
He has been marginalized.
He's sort of an accent now.
Yeah, he's kind of just like Scott.
He's barely in there. Yeah, he's just barely in there. You know.
He's certainly not on this level where Kirk is continuously sort of checking with him. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he will be more in the second movie, but wasn't as much in the first movie. But you got the sense that they were friends, but it was a little different.
Show. It's almost a miracle that it's become such a world phenomenon, almost a 50-year franchise, I guess, in 2016.
Absolutely, it's weird to think about. I mean, they'll be thinking about this like 100 years. They'll still be thinking about it.
You know, I wanted to say this just real quick. You know, Enterprise was the one show that I thought had no redeeming value of the spin-offs.
Yeah.
But all the others had something good in them. You know, at least one episode that I can say I really like that one. You know,
like I used to watch The Next Generation faithfully every Sunday when it would come out. And then towards the end of the last couple seasons, that kind of started to be a chore.
Yeah.
I think maybe that went on a couple seasons too long. You'd have a lot of good episodes, but then you'd get like a Troy episode or like a Dr. Crusher episode. Not to be sexist, but just like you get or like or
three Worfs in a row.
A Geordi episode. You know what I mean? Something like that. You just be like, oh god. Yeah. But. You know, and then of course the movies, they get kind of progressively worse as you move through the.
They're too concerned with being so movie-ish, you know.
Well, they're very, very, very different.
I wanted to say something about the movies in the industry real quick. I think the big problem we have right now is our educational system is not producing good writers anymore.
Wow.
You know, because we're dumbing everything down for our kids, making it easier for them. Yeah. But on top of that, I also realize that we have people rising to the top because of their skill at abasing themselves, at their skill at whoring themselves out. And we have people rising to the top because of their connection, like George W. Bush becoming president because he's George Jr. You see what I'm saying? So you got the wrong people rising to positions of power who don't really know what they're doing, and the result, you can see it in the media.
Star Trek.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but
and you know, it seemed like the studio, NBC at first really tried to kill it, despite the outpouring of support from the fans. It's amazing that
they were doing. They were just completely clueless. You got to think about these are guys that are in their 60s in the 60s. You know, so it's like what they've grown up with is like they haven't been relative since the 20s.
I think it must have been the underlying thing that I guess Nichelle Nichols said was that their politics, they didn't appreciate the multi-racial cast.
Not only that, but it's
utopian future.
And it's funny because
they don't like women being in positions of power. You know.
Not only that, but having said all that, they were highly cynical people. So it's like in the beginning, they demanded that Spock be removed because they said he looked like the devil. And then so like one of the directors was when Roddenberry absolutely insisted on keeping the Spock character, they said, okay, but you must keep the Spock episodes to a minimum, his screen time to a minimum. After 2 weeks, the directive was more Spock episodes. We need Spock.
And push him to the front,
because
the fan letters were coming in.
Spock, and so it's like it just shows that like they didn't have any actual conviction about this stuff. They were just worried about.
They were just interested in making money.
They were make money, and they didn't want to make any waves.
Almost fishing
they didn't
to like.
Get it. They didn't get the show.
He had some weird popular sex appeal, and they were trying to play on him as a romantic figure on some of the episodes.
You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. You know, he did because he just was weird looking. You know, odd looking, and I mean, he's a good looking guy. Sort of a vampire thing, maybe, almost.
But we all, I don't know how you first saw the show, but we probably caught it in syndication or VHS,
absolutely.
and I guess CBS got it starting in the 70s, and it got new life on a Saturday night.
Yeah, I caught it in syndication.
And that's how it kept going and getting more and more fans. You know,
and then the conventions came out, then the cartoons. The cartoon was the first spin-off, by the way.
The cartoons were
not Next Generation, the cartoon, and they were good.
Yeah, they were pretty good. There's some good ones. They're only about 10 minutes long, so that's
well, the thing that was interesting about the cartoons, I'd like to say, is that all the actors came in separately from each other. So you feel that the disjointedness, because no one's playing off each other. Yeah. They're just saying their lines separate from each other, and it shows.
So what he's saying is like, Shatner would come in and record all his lines for all the episodes of the cartoons. Then McCoy would come in the next day, record all his lines for all the episodes of the cartoons. And when they piece them together, you can tell that nobody's kind of in the same room. It does have this very kind of
disjointed. Yeah.
Well, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
They were able to get some great aliens in with the animation. I mean, not great.
That's the beautiful thing about the animation, though. Of course, is that means that now your special effects budget is unlimited. It's just whatever you can draw.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, drawing a horse is the same thing as drawing a 10-headed horse.
Yeah.
So. But no, I mean, there's a lot of great episodes of the original series. It's always my favorite of all the Star Treks. I just love, like I was saying, that dynamic between the people, the art direction, the set direction, the really vivid.
Let's talk about the cast for a moment. The cast was very likable. I think that was one of the reasons why the show did work, was because you liked these guys. You wanted to tune in next week to see them. You know, they were likable people. They're nice guys. And they are in real life. I've met these people. They're like off screen the way they are on.
They're so well developed. Like at the end of the episode, you'd have that comedy moment with the Trinity,
of course,
and Bones and Kirk would be amused at something, and Spock would maybe just twitch one eyebrow, and you just start laughing because you knew there's just some inside thing between them, and it's so
funny.
Well characterized.
And let's also say that Shatner, I think in everything he did, he was never better than in this. You know.
Shatner's a good actor. I like Shatner. One of the great things that he said.
But I mean, he nailed his performance in this.
One of the things he says is very wise about this, and I've mentioned this before, probably on these shows that we do, is that
he nailed the guest stars.
You know, he said people accuse him of overacting, quote unquote. But he said, you know,
he had to.
The monster was paper mache, the walls were paper mache, and the girl was just wearing a bikini with green paint on her. I mean, it's like if I didn't freak out about this stuff.
Who would?
Nobody would. So it's like he's the one that has to convey that it's life.
Can convey the emotion,
God. And so, you know,
he made it work.
Yeah, he did.
I'm Kirk.
But, well, guys, that was a great little talk we had today. And, you know, Sally, thanks for making that cake.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Next time we come back, talk about Mirror, some other stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe some favorite episodes of the spin-offs, huh?
Well, shall we talk about Trouble Tribbles? You know what I mean?
How much
next time?
How much time we got?
We're over.
We're done.
We're done. We're over 30. So.
Okay, I was going to talk about Gunsmoke in Space, but that doesn't have anything to do with any of the episodes we talked about, really. It changed from that. I mean, Roddenberry tried to sell it to NBC as, or Desilu, I guess. Wagon Train.
Wagon Train Space, yeah.
Wagon Train is the same way, though. I mean, it's one of these stories that's like...
multiple ways you can fix it, you know?
Well, there's multiple stories you can tell using that setup as Wagon Train. You can tell a sickness story. You can tell an Indian story, like threatening, war story. You can tell, like, a young lover's story. You know what I'm saying? You can tell all these different things happening on the Wagon Train. Star Trek's the same way, where it's like you can tell all these different little types of stories because you have this overall setup that's flexible enough.
Yeah, it can be a law enforcement.
It
can be a law enforcement story. It can be a military story. It can be a medical story.
In Star Trek, there's like military tribunal stories.
Yeah. Well, the menagerie, you know.
That's just right out of like World War II.
B movies.
But they had like war court movies. And stuff like that, where it was like those were famous for a while.
Yeah, they worked too.
So
they were fun.
So
it's good marketing, if nothing else, because you didn't have. Apparently, you had. Any sci-fi on TV was campy. I mean, you had Lost in Space. You had some other Rogers Rangers, some rocket thing where it was like, but kind of corny.
Tom Corbett, Space, that, you know.
And not only that, but the characters.
Thunderbirds. Let's not forget the Thunderbirds. Little dolls.
The bad guys are all the way bad. The good guys are all the way good. You know, they're all, the bad guys are just trying to do some stupid thing like take over the world or something like that. Where
So Roddenberry he pulls a trick. He sells it to him as a Western, but it ends up being a really much more subtle kind of a social commentary with the utopian
when it's at its best.
view.
When it's at its best, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, of course, Star Trek has its fair share of, schlock that's attached to it.
There's that atrocious third season that...
that was a disaster.
Now, I personally like the third season a lot just because I like that kind of stuff. But long-haired Kirk is what I like to call it.
Is that the one with Kirok and the...
Kirok, Kirk's hair is not... It's like, you can tell the progression of it because it's like the first season Kirk is very 50s buttoned down. I mean, he's basically got a buzz.
Horatio Hornblower in space.
And then, like, by the third season, his hair has grown out about 2 inches. And, he's got the 2-inch... He's got
sort of a hippie. I mean, not a...
They literally have the Hippies in Space episode, which is another one of my favorites. The Way to Eden, where
Who was the actor in that? Who was in the Rambo one? What was that? What's that actor's name?
What is his name? It's not Clint Howard, but
like the Brian Dennehy. Charles Napier.
As the
space hippie,
cult leader guy,
the lead space hippie.
No, he's the sporting one.
Yeah, he's like the lead of the kids, the space hippie kids, and. He went on, of course, to Rambo First Blood Part 2 fame, so...
Yeah, I loved it when he's playing that music, making fun of the crew of the Enterprise. That was cute.
No, that's great.
I laughed when they were doing that,
Spock jams. So, you have all this stuff where... And you know what? Behind the scenes, there was turmoil and stuff in that third season. I was actually, we saw on the... Recently, all the... I don't know if you know this, Tyler, but recently all the editions of Starlog magazine have become online. You can download any one.
Oh, wow.
Because Starlog folded, I guess, 5 years ago, and you have to wait 5 years, and then they all become public domain or something.
Yeah.
So, but I was reading some old Starlogs from the early 80s, and they were talking about the third season and some of the stuff that was happening behind the scenes. One of them is that Shatner had completely taken over the show. That's what this director was saying.
Yeah.
So they would have these script meetings continuously, like even into shooting. It's like Shatner would demand that a script meeting set up, and so it started dragging down production. But it's like Nimoy was kind of in on it too. It's like Nimoy would go over there, and the actors would, and they sort of change their lines. Which, you know, and we've filmed stuff before, on the fly like that, if you have a big production, you can't be changing your lines when you're shooting. I mean, it's like all that stuff has
You might not have what you need for the
way
script.
long before that, you know. So that's one thing that's happening. The other thing that happens is the station has already canceled the show once.
Yeah.
And the studio is just basically pushing these guys around like never before. And so
the budget was slashed and slashed.
You had this stuff where, and Roddenberry...
They had to do more and more episodes in the Enterprise.
At this point, is getting desperate. So he's even, you know... I mean,
said,
we like
"I'm
to
out,"
talk about
I think.
Yeah, we like to talk about his high ideals and stuff, but it's like, especially towards that last season, he was so desperate to keep it on the air that he was basically trying any kind of hucksterism to... At least at one point, Nimoy tells this great story about how they wanted him to give this award to somebody at the beginning of the show to sort of lead off the show. They were going to have an award medal ceremony on the Enterprise that got interrupted by phaser fire or something. And the award, the logo on it, just happened to be the logo of this company of like one of the sponsors, one of the new sponsors.
Oh.
And Nimoy refused to do the scene when he saw it, you know, and there was this big uproar over it. And they talk about that, but it's like, that's one of the more famous sort of episodes where Roddenberry was really trying to shove like just some crass commercials.
Just to keep the thing afloat.
Sponsor got a new sponsor. It's like, yeah, we'll put your logo in the show. I don't know how. It's like we'll put it on.
We'll squeeze it in, yeah.
Put it on a medal and give it to some guy, you know. So it's like, as much as credit, and I mean, he does deserve a lot of credit. It's like Roddenberry at the end was a show business guy.
Yeah.
He was into the business end of this as much as any.
He decided before the end too to maybe save his sanity, and he actually sort of removed himself from the set and let some directors take over, and he just became executive producer.
Sure.
I heard, this is an interesting story here about Gene Roddenberry too. When they did The Next Generation, he was the executive producer. He was having creative input on there, but very quickly that fell apart.
Yeah.
And they told him, just take your check, go home, Gene.
Especially if you look at those first episodes of The Next Generation, they're very, very Star Trek-y. The original series.
Very first few.
The very first few are very, very Star Trek-y, the original series. It's almost amazing when you look at from where they go to where they end up. You know, it's like, there's these great moments in the original series, like I always say, you know, the hand.
Yeah.
This hand shows up out of it, and grabs the Enterprise. Or, you know, Abraham Lincoln floating on a chair in space. It's like, you never saw that kind of stuff on The Next Generation, but in those first few Next Generation, you sort of are still in that world where like a hand could pop up, or they have like a Robin Hood episode or something.
I think Devil in the Dark is the sort of the spiritual predecessor of the Encounter at Farpoint. We have these aliens that are misunderstood, and
and they did that again. You know, like Crystalline Entity is another one where it was like, oh no, the Crystalline Entity. It's really intelligent, and you can tell it not to eat planets with people on them and stuff like that, you know.
Like in the Doomsday Machine.
Unless the evil android makes fun of it and makes it come over to the planet.
That's right, you know, unless you start, don't taunt. Do not taunt the crystalline.
But you know, Leonard Nimoy, he did say this in an interview. He said he was glad that it was canceled after the third season.
I'm sure they
He said we had run out of steam, we'd run out of money, we had run out of good ideas at that point. You know, we had nothing fresh, original to come up with. It was. He said it was time to throw in the towel.
The last few, and I think one of them that bugs me is the empath, where it's just black. You know, the whole thing is just taking place in this sort of black set with no kind of floors or ceiling or anything like that. And they're supposed to be in some underground space, but just the whole thing of it is just so, you know, it's just so, you know, sort of slapdash together.
It doesn't feel like Star Trek, the colorful
like
Star Trek we've come to.
You know, it just doesn't. You know, and it starts to feel like some kind of weird, like early 70s artifact, more like, you know, of like an example of early 70s television, which is sort of offshoot of, and you can see it's like if they would have gone another few seasons, we might not be talking about them in anywhere in. You know, it's always good to go out on top before you start to jump.
Yeah, but they were going out as they were sliding down. They were sliding. They weren't starting to slide. They were sliding.
Lost in Space thing after a couple more seasons, because Lost in Space started out much more serious than it.
It became very campy very quickly.
I think like Paramount. I think that they bought them for the third season, and it seemed like originally they knew what they had, what, you know, the value of the property, but they immediately just started slashing the budget, and then the channel wouldn't support them with the time slot, and the studio wouldn't support them with the money, and it's like, if they'd gotten a 4th season, it would have been unrecognizable as...
Probably.
It probably would have been a disaster, I think.
Because it's like, if they would have had the vision to put the budget back in, get some good writers, and keep it going. I mean, it's like...
And have a good time slot, you know.
Definitely. I mean,
but they needed to bring in fresh people, and they needed to bring in more money. And that wasn't happening.
Like, they could have had so much more content, you know.
I think Paramount, too, they went on to show just further a complete disregard, like through the movies, just reusing special effects from earlier movies.
Oh, yeah,
so
totally.
easily
the
recognized.
Movies were cheaply made.
Showed they had very little respect for the franchise.
There's shots in the movies that are like shots of, there's like the infamous Klingon that blows up in movie 6, and then the same thing blows up again in movie 7. They show the exact same shot, just reversed.
The guy's point is like, the explosion in 6, that was the climax of the whole movie, but in movie 7, it's just like a throwaway
little shot.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, Star Trek is like anything else. That's a popular of American pop culture. You know, it has its good and its bad, and there's always going to be sort of a yin and yang between commercialism and art. You know, but the thing that Star Trek is, like we were talking about, is this optimism, and it's sort of there's sort of like a gee whiz thing about it that's really kind of infectious.
Yeah, the main thing about it, the show was just a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Hot chicks, you know what I mean?
And now it's a really interesting social phenomenon if you go to the Trek Fest in Riverside.
Trek Fest is a blast. We go there every year.
And it's sort of become a cool, like, not only is it a refuge for nerds, but also sort of like the gay and lesbian community has embraced this.
Exactly.
And like,
Exactly.
it's sort of become a way to, a place where it's safe for you to be who you are.
Exactly. It's just one of those things where, you know, there's that great movie Trekkies too, where, you know, some of the Trekkies are, they obviously have some
dementia.
They obviously have some kind of
They're mentally ill.
They obviously have some kind of mental.
We're touched.
But at the same time, they are able to channel that into something semi-productive by, you know, embracing this fan community that's out there and becoming a member of that, where it's okay to go around and dress strangely and act a little strangely as long as it's, you know, you're not hurting anyone.
Well, I thought it was interesting. One of the women who makes a living, she has her own business. She dresses in a Star Trek uniform all the time, and she has everyone refer to her as Commander.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that kind of blew my mind. You know,
I was thinking of the guy who, there's also a guy who dresses up as, when they went back in time and met this astronaut, he dresses up as that astronaut's wife. So basically what this allows him to do is wear like 1960s women's clothing in public. You see what I'm saying? But by like this roundabout
way, yeah.
in his head, he's saying, no, I'm doing cosplay. I'm dressing up as this character who we never saw in we never see that character.
I remember that.
But at the same time, it's like more power to him. It's like, who cares? You know,
whatever makes you happy.
Exactly. The guy's not hurting
As Shatner says, get a life.
Get a life. Yeah, it's like obviously the guy's not hurting.
Oh, one thing I thought was interesting, though, Harlan Ellison, who worked on the show, actually hated the show, which I thought was strange, because this is what he's most known for, you know.
Well, Harlan Ellison is, you know, he's
got a lot of anger issues.
He does. There's this, like I was saying, I saw those star logs, and there's this great, I was just looking at these star logs. You go to Internet Archive for the home and look up Starlog magazine, and it's this behind the scenes film and television magazine that came about because of his Star Trek fan. So like, especially for the first 5 years, there's always a Star Trek, the original series article in there, you know.
No.
But there's this great thing, there's this letters section, and it's from about like 81 or something. Harlan Ellison has written in to rip Mark Hamill in the pages of Starlog. They like had something where it's like, what do you think of Harlan Ellison's critique of Star Wars? Because I guess he was not a fan of Star Wars.
He thought it was. He said Luke Skywalker sucks eggs.
Yeah, Mark Hamill just said some kind of dismissive thing about Harlan Ellison and books in general, and
they had a feud going for a while.
Harlan Ellison just has this letter in there where it's just this venom.
Laying into Mark Hamill.
Like, you know, it's of all targets, Mark Hamill, and of all like venues, the pages of Starlog. You know, to have this like public feud between Harlan Ellison, it's like, don't you think this is a little bit beneath us, guys?
Sir.
Where, you know, yeah, exactly. Pardon me, sir, but and he's like Mark Hamill can barely read, let alone, you know, it's just this kind of
mean-spirited attack.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about Harlan, but I mean,
Harlan's got. I met Harlan Ellison. He threatened to kick my ass.
Writers
yeah, he has hostility.
Writers always have a martyr complex.
Yeah.
I'm just the writer.
Did he write? Oh boy. The stainless steel rat?
No, that
He's
wasn't him.
got some books though that were famous.
We'll edit
too,
that out.
You know.
Well, he did Essential Harlan Ellison.
He had some series that he.
Yeah, he's done a lot of. He's done a huge number of books. Yeah. But he illustrated Harlan Ellison. That was a series of his short stories. Essential was his articles that he'd written.
A lot of them wrote for Star Trek, though.
Well, the thing was what I heard from a woman who knew Harlan, that he only takes credit for City on the Edge of Forever, but he had a hand in all 3 seasons as a rewriter for these.
That one surprised me.
He actually did write a lot of the episodes, but he didn't want to put his name on it because he was ashamed. You know, he tried to attack some Trekkies when he was drunk at a sci-fi convention. Huh. Yeah, he came. They came.
Were you one of the Trekkies?
No. I heard about it the second hand, but he was drunk and he's
second-hand knowledge. Harlan.
Yeah. He was drunk and these people.
Is he gone? Is he dead?
This is
he's still alive.
The enhanced.
Star Trek.
Yeah, they went back and redid it. They
redid the special effects, and it was good.
I'm against all that kind of stuff, and when I heard they're going to do that, it turned my stomach.
Yeah.
But they did it.
But it worked.
Just barely enough a respectable way. I mean, it's like
they didn't change it that much. It still had the same look and feel.
The same feel. You know, the other thing is, like I said about the movie too, is you know, just enough of. They preserved. It's like when I heard they were going to reboot Star Trek, I was like not enthused.
Yeah.
Me too.
And went to the movie, was pleasantly surprised to the point where, you know, I stuck through the movie. As you know, I like to leave movies early. That's one of the things I like to do. Even when I kind of like the movie, I like to leave movies early. And so I was about to leave. You know, I was like, I'd gotten about 3/4 of the way through it, and I was like, okay, they're starting to sort of repeat themselves already with the new movie. You know what I mean? And this is we're kind of starting to tread water here. And because I had enjoyed it, there were some parts that were kind of groaners and eye rollers. But then right then is when Nimoy showed up, the original Spock. You know, he showed up, and so it was like they sort of saved his cameo for just the right emotional moment in the film, which like right where you needed sort of like a lift and to remind you of why you care about all this stuff.
I think we'd just seen a little person with a blue painted face. And
right,
like,
yeah.
So here we go.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got Ewoks already in movie one.
And, you know,
that Star Trek movie that I saw where they were cadets, you know, the young crew.
The 2009 Star Trek?
Yeah. You know, I remember walking out of the theater. I'm not even a half a block. And I literally couldn't remember anything in the movie.
That happens you after lunch, Tyler.
It was like a sound and fury, you know, signifying nothing.
It was a lot of stuff, and that movie does not hold up. I mean, we could go into a whole show about
why that one was terrible. But one thing, I do want to do a quote on Star Trek. This one person did a review of it where he said that the show Star Trek is a form of hero worship by people that are basically lost in society and they're looking for something to look up to. And he said, and they're looking up to a show that basically rose to the level of mediocrity. And Harlan said that was just so right on with the fans. He says he's not criticizing so much the show itself, but the fandom that followed it. Which was way out of proportion for what they achieved.
Anytime you get something that achieves that kind of critical inertia, critical mass as an object of pop culture, it's going to just start getting its ass kissed for its own sake. Star Wars is another one.
Yeah,
jumps on the bandwagon.
If people jump on the bandwagon, they attribute much more to it than it was ever intended by the makers, and they read way too much into stuff, and they get into like the minutia of it. It just was. And
people say things that are just absolutely asinine and insane. Like Star Trek is better than Hamlet. It's just ridiculous, you know.
And all sorts of stuff like that, you know. I mean, that's a good point. It's like all this stuff is fairly ridiculous.
We got to put it in perspective a little bit here. It's like fun, but it's not great art.
It's like, you know, there's always like you can say, well, there's worse hobbies to have. You know, there's worse things to be into.
And I think bringing it full circle a little bit, the original series has more. When I think about rewatching an episode, if I've got an extra hour, I usually think about going back to the original series as opposed to Next Generation or any other iterations, even though they're like better in a way. But I just sort of yearn for the characters, I think.
I got to say this, from my perspective, I'm lucky in this regard that a guy like me, I missed them when they were out there. So I can go on the internet, you know, they got listed the top 10 episode Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, top 10 X-Files episodes. oh, look at that. What are the best? I'll watch those, and I'll skip the rest. You know what I'm saying? So for a guy like me, you know, that I was kind of lucky that I missed it when it was out there. Now I can go back and check it. The best stuff.
It's an a la carte world.
Yeah, absolutely.
But is that, should we
I think we wrap it.
All right.
Yeah.
We will boldly go where we've been many times before, and we're wishing all of you live long and prosper.
We'll see you next time.
It was this.
Great.